With free agency right around the corner and the NFL draft less than 2 months away, it's time to create Brandon Beane's to-do list today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Friday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, or if you're joining us on YouTube, your first watch every day. As a reminder, Locked On Bills is free and available on all platforms. Today on the podcast, I want to give you Brandon Beane's off-season checklist, which is basically me stacking the needs of this football team and giving some recommendations on how Brandon Beane should go about addressing those needs. And so we have a couple other things in addition to the needs to get to, but there'll be more brief conversations. So let's start with the first thing Brandon Beane's going to have to do, and that is create cap space. The Bills are over the salary cap as of the recording of this podcast, which is actually last week because I recorded it in advance of me going to the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, so I wouldn't have to deal with it while I was on the road. So maybe Brandon Beane has made a few moves to create some space, and if that is the case, you can trust that I have done some emergency podcasts where I will talk about those specific moves. But as of the recording of this podcast, the first thing Brandon Beane has to get done is create cap space. And I'm not going to sit here and give you all of the ways that Brandon Beane can do that because we did that already. We had a conversation with Greg Tomset from Cover One about 2 weeks ago on the salary cap and specifically what Brandon Beane can do to create cap space. And he has a lot of opportunity. So the Bills are not in great shape in terms of available cap space as of the time of this discussion, but there are very common sense moves that can be made to create the cap space necessary to get some stuff done this offseason. So with that out of the way, with the acknowledgement that Brandon Beane has to create cap space, and that's first on his to-do list, the next thing we can do is start stacking the needs of this football team. And if I have identified 11 things that Brandon Beane has to get done this offseason. And I'm giving you these in order, the order of importance. Now, to steal something that Bruce Nolan shared on the Bruce Exclusive podcast, part of the Buffalo Rumblings podcast feed, when considering needs, number one need does not correlate with number one resource investment. You're going to see punter on this list. That doesn't mean that the Bills should draft a punter with their first round pick. So just keep that in mind. Rank of need does not equate to what you put into that need. All right? So let's stack them up. The number one need that I have for the Buffalo Bills entering this offseason is interior defensive line. Defensive tackle. Why? Well, right now the only ones on the roster are Ed Oliver and Star Lotulelei. And I think the Bills need to obviously strengthen that situation. I'm excited about Ed Oliver, but the Bills need to have depth behind him. And the one tech thing, even if Star is back, I have concerns about his availability. He might retire. There's been some speculation on that. And I would say even if Harrison Phillips is brought back, the Bills have a need at one tech. So I think the Bills have to find a couple of options here. A backup 3 tech and a starter, if not backup 1 tech. So what is my recommendation for Brandon Beane in terms of how to address this? I think he needs to use a premium draft investment and veteran help. Pick a player in the first 2 rounds at defensive tackle and sign a meaningful veteran. because you have a lot of snaps available for these players. Like I said, even if Harrison Phillips is back, you still have a ton of snaps that need to be accounted for in other ways. And so these guys are going to play, and they're going to play at an important spot for this team. So I'm calling for an early draft pick and a veteran at defensive tackle. Number 2, backup quarterback. The Bills have got to find a reasonable backup quarterback. Why? Well, they don't have one. Mitchell Trubisky is very likely to sign with a team that's going to give him an opportunity to start. Davis Webb is on the Giants. He already signed with them. And there's no other quarterback that's not Josh Allen on this team right now. And while I hope we never have to see this backup quarterback play, we have to be mindful that it is a possibility. And Josh Allen is a physical quarterback that runs and does all kinds of crazy stuff on the football field. And you need to make sure that you have a plan in place. I said this a ton back when Matt Barkley was the Bills' backup quarterback, but the rest of the Bills roster is too good to be one snap away from Matt Barkley. And Josh Allen has had good health over the last few years, and obviously I hope that continues forever. But if he were to miss 3 or 4 games, I'd like to know that the Bills had something reasonable to lean on to come in and give the Bills a chance and not completely ruin the season. So I'm calling for a veteran here. I want the Bills to sign Ryan Fitzpatrick or Marcus Mariota or somebody that you feel good about being able to come in and play reasonably. Kyle Allen. Somebody like that. Somebody with some game experience that could come in and give you a chance if 17 goes down. Number 3, I have defensive end. Well, I think the answer here is, or the reason why here is pretty clear. Right now, it's Greg Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, Boogie Basham. That's it. Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison, F.A. Obata, all expiring contracts. And so my recommendation for Brandon Beane is to sign a veteran. You need a veteran in this room. That's a premium position. We're talking defensive end. And while I'm hopeful that Rousseau and Basham and Epinesa can be a really rock-solid top 3, I'd want to make sure that you have a veteran in that room. And so whether that's Jerry Hughes, whether that's Mario Addison, whether that's an outside candidate like a Whitney Merciless or something like that, you need to find something else here to go in this room to really kind of glue it all together and make sure that you have a contingency plan factored in, because right now we have not seen nearly enough from Epinesa or Basham to feel good about them playing 50, 60, 70% of the snaps. So I recommend a veteran to be added to this room. Number 4, cornerback. Why is this an important need for the Bills? Well, Levi Wallace is an expiring contract. He's obviously been the starter. Trey White is coming off of an ACL tear. He had surgery in December. It's a 9 to 12-month recovery. And you need to find some answers here. And maybe that is as simple as bringing back Levi Wallace and having Wallace and Jackson start while Trey White gets himself ready to go. But as we've discussed multiple times, this is Levi Wallace's big opportunity in his career to land a big contract. And I expect him to chase the money. So what are my recommendations for Brandon Beane at cornerback? I would have a bargain veteran. And if Levi Wallace comes back on a bargain deal, then great. If not, then find yourself a player that can come in on a $4 or $5, $6 million average annual value type contract and pair that with a somewhat reasonable draft pick in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th round to make sure that you have a meaningful developmental piece and a veteran that you have some level of comfort with to come in and perform at a baseline level until Trey White can get back on the field. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, and they even have the Vegas casino games. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action, because BetOnline is where the game starts. So my top 4 needs for the Bills entering this offseason are interior defensive line, backup quarterback, defensive end, cornerback, and now number 5 is wide receiver. Why is this a need? Well, Emmanuel Sanders is likely to walk in free agency or retire. Cole Beasley is getting up there in age. It's the final year of his deal if he's brought back. Isaiah McKenzie is an expiring contract. So the need is very obvious, on top of us having a rock-solid understanding that Josh Allen's bread and butter is throwing the football to wide receivers. Over the last 2 years, that's what he's done. Throw the ball to receivers. And not just 1 or 2, 3 or 4. You need to have 4 guys in this offense that you trust to make plays. So it's an important spot. And I keep saying this, but I want to make sure that the cupboard is always full for Josh Allen when it comes to pass-catching talent at wide receiver. So my recommendation here is a meaningful draft pick, something in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, maybe 4th round that can come in and be wide receiver 4 this year. If your top 3 are Diggs, Davis, and Beasley, I like that a lot. Well, you need that 4th guy. You need the new Gabriel Davis, right? And I think the Bills need to be focused in on finding that guy. Number 6, running back 2. Why? Well, the Bills have Devin Singletary and what? Zach Moss has not developed well for this football team. Matt Breida was a flop. By the end of the season, Devin Singletary was the only running back the Bills trusted to hand the football to. That's not good. You need more, right? The good thing about running back production is it's not hard to find. The Bills can very easily find running back production, but they need to find it, because right now they have Devin Singletary and nobody else that they trust to hand the football to. Oh, by the way, Devin Singletary is entering the final year of his contract. So what I'm looking for here is a bargain veteran and a mid-round draft pick. A bargain veteran like a Deonta Foreman. A Marlon Mack maybe type player, even though I don't totally love him. And some type of mid-round pick. Jerome Ford from Cincinnati, Brian Robinson from Alabama, Dameon Pierce from Florida. Plenty of good options. There's always good options in the middle of rounds at running back, and the Bills need to find somebody that can challenge to be RB2 this year. Number 7, tight end 2. Why? Well, just like running back, the Bills have Dawson Knox. At running back, they have Devin Singletary, and then nothing behind that player. You've heard me say this a bunch. The Bills only dressed 1 active tight end by choice down the stretch last year. After the Carolina game, Tommy Sweeney was a healthy scratch every week. It was Dawson Knox and nothing else. And we know that this is an 11 personnel offense, right? That's the base. It's probably the base package, right? It's built off of 11 personnel, which means a tight end's on the field every single snap. Almost. And you're going to be 1 snap away from having to abandon that, right? I think that's irresponsible. You need to have another tight end that you're willing to play and can serve as a reliable backup to Dawson Knox. And so if Tommy Sweeney can't be that guy, then you probably need to find 2 tight ends. And maybe the best way to do that is a bargain veteran and a mid-round pick. Number 8 is punter. Why? Well, you know exactly why. Matt Hawk's the worst punter in the NFL. Talked about that last week in the performance review for safeties and special teams. I went through the metrics on Matt Hawk. Literally the worst punter in the league. He can't be back. He can't be back as a team's punter. And again, one of the key things that I hammered home last week is that this isn't a overreaction to 1 bad season from Matt Hawk in Buffalo. He was terrible with Miami before. We know exactly what Matt Hawk is in the NFL, a really, really poor punter. And so the Bills got to find something here. And I'd love for them. I love the idea that they had with Matt Hawk. The idea was that this guy can be at least an average punter and can mesh with Tyler Bass as the holder to establish consistency there. And they're mirrored up the contracts and all that. But Matt Hawk is obviously not going to be able to be that guy. And so I'd love to find a player that can grow with Tyler Bass and be the punter / holder alongside him, and they can be this very consistent field goal operation. And so maybe that's a draft pick. Maybe that's a veteran. But the Bills have to really get this punter thing figured out, because last year was a total embarrassment from Matt Hawk. Number 9, I have offensive line and specifically developmental depth. This is a little bit low. Like I said, I only have 11 things here. And after punter, my urgency really drops. So punter I had at 8, 9, 10, 11 are not like super urgent concerns for me. And I know that might seem crazy to you that I don't view offensive line as a major need. And maybe there's some value in certain spots in the draft where I would like some offensive linemen, but I don't go into this offseason with a lot of like major concern with the offensive line. Like I said on yesterday's podcast, I mean, if the offensive line room was your starters, Dawkins, Bates, Morse, Darrell Williams, Spencer Brown, your depth players were Ike Bacher, Cody Ford, John Feliciano, Tommy Doyle, and some guys that Aaron Cromer brings in that are his guys, I'm pretty much okay with that. And so maybe a developmental guy in the draft that can play guard or tackle, I'd be thinking about that, but I'm not sure that I have a whole lot of like massive concern about the Bills' offensive line right now. I'm looking for some developmental depth, and I think the Bills' offensive line can get better in a number of ways with the same players they already have, with Aaron Cromer coming in to coach. Ryan Bates now, I know it sounds crazy, but entrenched as left guard and how much better he can become. Darrell Williams is entrenched at right guard and how much better he'll become as the right guard. And then Spencer Brown in year 2. I mean, there's plenty of reason to believe that this offensive line, despite being the same names, can take a step forward, a major step forward next year. So I'm just looking for some developmental depth, to be honest with you, at the offensive line. This is the time of year that I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It's almost not like having a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried Built Puffs? If you haven't, you are missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar, they are a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate because all Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, Puffs included, and most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. So they are super healthy for you, and they're delicious, and they have so many great flavors: mint brownie, raspberry, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, and new for this month is the white chocolate cookies and cream. You got to check these things out. They're coming out with new flavors all the time. And at Built Bar, it is all about taste. They make it taste delicious first, then they figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how they do it, but they pull it off every single time. Got a deal for you. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, I have 2 more needs that I want to get to in terms of Brandon Beane's checklist for the offseason. Number 10 is linebacker. And again, this is my second to bottom need for the team. And the reason why is, I mean, you have your 2 starters in Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano, and you have depth players in Tyrell Dotson, in Andre Smith, and Joe Giles-Harris that are interesting to me, in addition to Tyler Medikevich. And then we don't expect A.J. Klein to be back, but even if he's not, I mean, between Dotson, Smith, and Joe Giles-Harris, you'd like to think that that third linebacker is one of those 3 guys. And so I'm not looking for much from the Bills at linebacker, just some developmental depth. And then lastly, I have safety. Well, the reason why it's my last need in terms of priority is because I think Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde have at least 2 good seasons, 2 elite level seasons left, and I think they can get to 3 or 4 more. And you've got developing depth behind them already in Jaquan Johnson and DeMar Hamlin. Josh Thomas is there. And so a late round pick is all I'm looking to see added to the safety room, maybe some UDFAs. But I'm not anywhere near being concerned about what the Bills have at safety, to be honest with you. So it's number 11 for me. So to recap, my ranking of the Bills' needs entering the offseason: number 1, interior defensive line; number 2, backup quarterback; number 3, defensive end; number 4, cornerback; number 5, wide receiver; number 6, RB2; number 7, tight end 2; number 8, punter; number 9, offensive line, developmental depth specifically; number 10, linebacker; and 11, safety. Now, one other thing that I want to mention here in terms of Brandon Beane's to-do list, because we went through and said, okay, create cap space. Number 2 is identify the needs. So we did that and we stacked them. And the last thing is to consider some contract extension candidates. And I have 5 players written down, and they're in 2 different categories. First is the no-brainers, and the second is players to at least think about. So in the no-brainer category, I have Stephon Diggs, Jordan Poyer, and Dawson Knox. The reason that they are no-brainers is, first of all, let's talk about Stephon Diggs. And we've had this conversation before. Stephon Diggs has outplayed his contract by a great margin. I mean, his average annual value is pretty low compared to the production. And obviously, he's a team captain. Josh Allen loves him. And so he's a player that I've said this before. I want Brandon Beane to beat Stephon Diggs to the punch. I don't want to see tweets or anything out there about Stephon Diggs wanting a new deal. I just want it to happen. I just want to scroll Twitter on some random day and find out that Stephon Diggs has been extended. And us to never hear about a rift or him feeling slighted or anything like that, because the man has obviously outperformed his deal. And I think the team needs to take care of him. And so what makes this even more important to me is that the Bills can extend Stephon Diggs and check a major box there, but also it can help them create cap space. And so I'd be super interested in that if I was Brandon Beane. Number 2 is Jordan Poyer. I really think these guys have 2, 3, 4 good seasons left in them. And this is the last year of Jordan Poyer's contract. And I'll be honest with you, I don't want to think about the Bills' defense without Hyde and Poyer back there. I'm not ready to have that thought. And Micah Hyde's got 2 years left on his deal. I'd like to see the same at least for Jordan Poyer. So add maybe 1 more season. Perhaps it can help you with some cap space. But I want to make sure Jordan Poyer is locked up, because what more could this man have done? Came over on 2017, and he played on like a 4-year, $12 million deal. And then he finally got the extension he deserves. And I'd like to see him continue to be rewarded. I mean, this guy just was an all-pro. Should have been a Pro Bowler. Should have been a Pro Bowler a few different times. I mean, he's playing great ball. I'm not concerned about decline there. I'd like for him to be taken care of. Then number 3 is Dawson Knox. Talked a little bit about the tight end market this past week when I talked about the Ian Thomas thing and how I thought that contract was ridiculous by the Carolina Panthers. And the tight end market is going up. We've seen big deals recently for guys like Dallas Goedert and Mark Andrews. And, Darren Waller's going to get a big contract this offseason. Mike Gesicki's a free agent. And I just think the value opportunity could be right now with Dawson Knox coming off of a great season. This guy goes out there and has another great season. He's going to be really, really, really expensive. And so I'd go ahead and get it taken care of now. Obviously, Dawson Knox loves Josh Allen. He's developed. He's a draft pick. He's done everything you could have asked for him to do. And so I'd go ahead and get it taken care of now, because I think this could be your best opportunity to really get some value out of the deal. So those are my 3 no-brainers: Diggs, Poyer, and Knox. I'd get those done right away. And then in my to consider category, and I don't want to go too crazy here, but Tremaine Edmunds is in here. Because if this is your guy, this is your quarterback of your defense, the leader of your defense, he matters so much to you. Well, I mean, he's playing on the last year of his deal. And so if he's your guy, he's your guy. I'd be mindful of that. And then the other player is Mitch Morse. Mitch Morse, I think he's a quality center. I really enjoy having him. It's a little bit challenging because you always are nervous about the injury stuff, right? The concussions has not really been a problem for the Bills, right? I mean, he missed, 1 or 2 games a couple of years ago, but for the most part has been extremely healthy and reliable and available for the team and played well. And so I think for Mitch, who has taken a pay cut already, I'm sure he'd love to have some stability in terms of where he's going to play football. We know he's a family guy. He's got a new baby. So I'm sure he'd love to be dialed into where he's going to play ball. And I think he's a quality center. And so if you feel good about him and the availability stuff that you always have filed away in the back of your mind, you feel good about that, I'd consider extending him, and maybe there's a way to do that and also create some cap space at the same time. So there you have it. Brandon Beane's off-season checklist: create cap space, stack the needs, and then also consider your extension candidates. I guess I could have talked about the 5th-year option with Ed Oliver, but it's such a cut and dry decision. And Brandon Beane's already teased that he needs that he's going to do it, right? He all but came out and said he's going to pick up that 5th-year option, but that is on his to-do list this offseason as well. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast and this week on the podcast. I certainly hope you enjoyed. I have. And I'm looking forward to next week because we're going to give you some free agency stuff. I have 1 day dedicated to offense, 1 day dedicated for defense. And at the end of the week, I'm going to do my mock offseason where I will give you my free agent signings. I'll do a mock draft, and then I'll do a 53-man roster projection. So before this thing even happens, because after next week, it's free agency, right? It starts that week. I want to go ahead and give you my mock offseason, and that should be really, really fun to work through. So make sure you're subscribed. Don't miss it. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great weekend, and I look forward to catching up with you again on Monday.